and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in a clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have, this is the second week in a row that we lost a guest due to laryngitis. So our laryngitis guest from last week is joining us, and that's Marsha Barnhart. And I'm pretty darn excited about having her on. I've listened to some shows that she's done. She's really on the ball. I think you really enjoy her. And she was like a charter member of the Aerial Phenomena Investigations team. And I think that was back in 2011 when that was formed. And she is a pro. You know, she's been in radio and television for quite a while. So anyway, I think you'll really enjoy her this evening. Our show, the Everything Else show, is now available for anyone that is a subscriber to Podcast UFO. That's all part of the feed. I hope you enjoy that. There's all different types of topics. We're scheduled all the way into June, I think mid-June already. So that is going well. That's, if you want to listen to that or watch that, I should say, it's live stream, just as this show is. That's on Monday evenings, and you'll see the link to the Everything Else show right on Podcast UFO, or you can see it on YouTube as well. Very, very active chat room, a lot of fun. So same with this show here. And that is it. If you support the show, I want to say thank you very much. And all it costs is $2 or more a month for anyone that's kind of on the edge that may want to help us out. You can check all that information on our website. Alejandro, how are you?
Good. So what do you have to say to the people who don't want to support you?
Oh, well, I like each and every listener. Thank you for listening to the show, whether you can or cannot support the show. And if you really would like to support the show, but you can't, just send me an email.
Well, that's nice. You're so nice.
Yeah.
Some people would say if you don't want to support me, then you can flip off or something like that. But no, that was very nice of you.
So what's going on with you?
So what's going on? You mean with UFO News or with me in particular?
Yes.
Well, they often are one and the same. So I can think of something going on with me that is UFO related, which is on our YouTube, and let me plug it. I posted a lecture I gave to Phoenix MUFON, which is similar but expanded to what I gave to the Phoenix Symposium or MUFON Symposium last summer. So you can see my talk on international UFO, official government UFO organizations, how they got started, the often amazing cases that got these governments started in UFO research. I covered the existing ones. I lightly covered the U.S., Canada, but the UK is particularly interesting. I don't think people know the history there so much. So that's a good one. But, of course, I cover France and Chile and lots of other stuff. So you're asking about me personally. That's what's going on with me.
Uh-huh. All right, well, what about the UFO world?
The UFO world. The whole world is a UFO world. So what's funny is there's a lot of attitude towards this Tom DeLonge thing. People criticizing us for having given him an award, but it's kind of funny because people are like, oh, I can't believe that. They're still talking about it. People will not shut up about Tom DeLonge and what he may or may not reveal. Even the people who are just disgusted that it exists at all. I don't understand that perspective. because why not? If he's out there doing stuff, why not pay attention to it and see what he's up to? But it's kind of funny. The reason I bring it up is because Mother Jones did an interview that was actually pretty good recently, that people can check that out. You can see that in our daily headlines. Also in the headlines, this is kind of weird, and maybe you'll have an answer to it. Yesterday, actually, the Denver News Channel, which is a local Denver, actually, TV station, and that's just their website, they looked into the Blue Book files, and they put like a top 10 list together of Colorado Blue Book files, which is kind of cool. So, that's cool. I can see a reporter running across those and wanting to do that. However, today, here in the Phoenix area, they wrote a story about a UFO occurrence. And in that story, they embedded 15 Arizona UFO stories from Project Blue Book. So they also went into Project Blue Book to take a look. So that's kind of weird, huh?
Wow. The average Joe out there wouldn't have any idea what Project Blue Book was. They'd think it's something to, find a car on or something, maybe.
Yeah, you're right, because they even write about it. They write, the Arizona Republic sifted through more than 100 reports from the Project Blue Book files, researching reports searching for the interesting, the bizarre, and unbelievable stories from Arizona's UFO sightings. Right there, which is interesting, they're assuming people know what Project Blue Book is. And I think you're right that not everybody does.
Right.
But the story, they embedded that into, because that's kind of a gallery in a story. But the story is something they took from Preston Dennett's recent book about UFOs over Arizona, where a man claimed to have seen a UFO land in the local zoo, the Phoenix Zoo here.
Wow. Picking up specimens, I'm sure.
Yep, specimens. A great place to pick up a specimen. And it's a cool zoo. I love our zoo. It's just actually here in the Tempe, near Tempe. It's just up the street here, and really nice. Of course, it gets hot in the summer. But we have two zoos. So we have the main Phoenix Zoo here, and then outside of town, we have the Jack Hanna, wildlife zoo or something like that. It's huge. They have white tigers there, and they keep a lot of birds and stuff. It's kind of a rescue as well.
Oh.
So
that part's good. That's great.
So, there's I have one more UFO news story.
Great, okay.
So this is cool. This is something Roger Marsh posted today, and it is another account of a giant triangular UFO that simply disappeared.
Wow. Is this the one in Pennsylvania?
It is.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
I was looking at that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The witness was driving near their home at 8:30 p.m. on February 14th, 2017, when the incident occurred. My attention was drawn to a triangular object in the sky quickly flying towards me, the witness stated. It was low and had a couple of alternating bright flashing white lights with the red light. There were several other smaller flashing white lights that outlined the rectangular object. So he said he was drawn to watch it. He stopped on the road, watched it for a while, and then it made a quick 90-degree change and simply disappeared.
Wow. I was thinking I was watching the Unexplained Files or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with all that, your commentary.
Oh, yeah. The way I was doing that. Did you like that?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And I alternated between the narrator voice and the witness voice.
I think we caught that, Alejandro.
Just to make it a little more exciting. But yeah, the person said the event only took a couple minutes and it happened so quickly they were not able to take pictures. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much par for the course, The fact that it disappeared is just, just something you do hear of quite a bit and almost makes you, it's just more wonderment, what the heck could it be?
What the hell is up with those damn triangular craft?
That's right. Let's get Dave Marler on the phone right now. Ask him what's going on.
WTF.
Yeah. You got it, man. All right. That sounds like a wrap for today.
Okay, there you go. There's the news. You can read it all at openminds.tv. And remember, you might have to go into like the daily headlines to see some of those stories I talked about. But otherwise, you'll find everything right there on the front page.
Great. All right, Alejandro, thanks a lot.
Thank you, my friend.
Sure thing. Hang in, everyone, for just a quick music break, and we'll be right back with Marsha Barnhart. Hello there, Marsha. How you doing?
Very well. Good to see you again, Martin.
Yes. Thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate it. And I mentioned in the monologue that I listened to a couple of your shows that you do with API and really thought you did a very professional job.
Well,
much better than me. So, hey, what got you interested? I just want to start. What got you interested in this topic to begin with?
Well, much like you, Martin, when I was growing up in the 60s, there was a UFO flap in my little town. And that had a big impact on me because the people who were talking about seeing strange creatures and weird lights were my father's friends, adults who I didn't think would be making those things up because, that was their reputation. And some of the things they talked about were just weird. So
now,
that
what part of the?
flap.
I'm sorry. What part of the country did you grow up in?
I'm an Oregonian.
Oh,
And I grew up.
Yeah.
I grew up in a little lumber town called Toledo, which is about 10 miles right from the coast, the Pacific coast. So I essentially grew up in a rainforest. But yeah, I'm an Oregonian, and this was a little flap in my town in the 60s and it was the late 60s, so it was probably 64, 65, 66, something like that.
I have a friend that lives on Gold Beach.
Yeah.
You know where that is? Yeah.
Yes.
And she says there's things going on there now. I don't know if you stay in touch with anyone back there and how much activity that people talk about. But she had such a strange story. I almost wanted to bring it onto this show. At some point I might if I feel comfortable enough. But it's pretty odd. But it has to do with that town and offshore and all that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the beach. And yeah, I know it's ongoing. I did an API case for a guy from Newport about 6-7 months ago. And Newport is real close to Gold Beach, and this thing he saw was a large T-shaped craft that was flying off kilter, and it went right over the ocean. And the neat thing about this guy was a professional. He was an oceanographer. He was a PhD. And it pretty much rattled his world, but I got a good case out of him and got a good interview. So sure, it's going on. And when you read Newfork reports, it's going on everywhere.
I know. I don't, there was an article that came out, I don't know if you saw it, I think it was about 2 years ago, where someone wrote, "Where's all the UFOs? There's nothing happening anymore." And I've never seen anything slow down since I started to look into this topic.
Yeah. Flaps are a whole different thing. It's a real dust up of activity for a while. And however long they last, you don't know. They're transitory. But there's pretty much, if you look at Newfork, which is one of my favorite places to just browse, because I kind of correlate some data off that, knowing full well that some of these things are just, planes going over or whatever. So you have to glean through. But it's happening all the time in every state. And I got a couple of cases from India, and I'd read somewhere, somebody had written that it seemed like there was an uptick of cases in India, but I don't really know.
Wow. There's a bunch of people all saying hi to you in the chat room.
Hi, greetings. Greetings across the ether.
Yes, that's right. It is really amazing, isn't it, that here we are. You're out there in California, and here I am.
No. I'm
Oh,
in
I'm
Michigan.
sorry. You're still
I'm
in
north of
Oregon.
Michigan. Yeah, I'm sitting here looking out I'm from Oregon. Yes, I was
you're
born
Michigan.
and raised in Oregon. But then I joined the Air Force and went away for forever. And I ended up in Baltimore working. And then my husband and I retired here in northern Michigan, just outside of Cadillac.
Now, I've been through Michigan when I used to kind of play or collect antique boats, and there's a lot of them out there because of all
Yeah.
your lakes. It's absolutely beautiful, but you have some winters much like here in Maine, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, how much snow did you get from that snowmageddon? When we talked not too long ago, you had a great big, we never got any, but I know you
Yeah,
probably got
that was
some.
another additional 24 inches.
Good God.
So it's
Well,
been
you keep
it's
that.
been enough, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But so sorry I got your location wrong. I was mixing you up with another guest. Pardon me about that.
Yeah, just keep in mind Oregonians don't like Californians. It's a
And that's
long
where
thing.
everyone from California moves.
That's why Oregonians don't like Californians all that much.
Yeah, that's
Let
right.
bygones be bygones.
Yeah, yes.
I'm drinking tea because my throat is still sore.
I know.
And this is hot honey in here, and it just feels so good.
And just to let the listener know, this Sunday I got a note from John Burroughs, who was the guest this week, said I have laryngitis. And that's just what happened to you last week. So luckily we were able to swap it out, and John's going to be on next week. That is, if his voice is in order. So you get interested in this basically since childhood, is that right? And
Absolutely.
and but then you decided to take it serious and join as one of the founding members of API, and that was back in 2011 when you first started forming that. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you go into what the mission statement basically is of API?
Yeah, that's pretty much to do investigations on aerial phenomena that our point is to try to figure out and research the information to the point that you could take it to a court. We are not trying to prove there are UFOs or ETs or anything like that. We're agnostic when it comes to that. None of us know how you're going to prove that.
Yeah.
Or conversely disprove it. But we have a little niche area, and that is that we just investigate the report the best we can to find the facts to give the person, the witness, some idea of what they may have seen. And oftentimes we're able to do that. And people are really grateful that they have been told what this most likely is. Sometimes we can be 100%. I was just 100% with the case over Colorado. It was a high altitude weather balloon. And the witness who saw that, she was kind of upset by it. It does kind of upset your worldview. And she was very happy to find out that it was a balloon that was as large as a stadium flying 16 miles up in the air.
Wow.
And it kind of came to a slow halt for a little bit because how the stratosphere works. And that freaked her out. And then it just kind of off it went. And so when I did the research on it, I found the guy whose organization launched that. And they said, yeah, they had gotten reports from Colorado. I mean, if something is 16 miles up in the air and it's pure white, you're going to see it for a long time. So things like that are very satisfying because not only do you as an investigator get to use your investigative chops and nail down what it is, but you can go back to the witness and tell them definitively what it is. And they have a good feeling about it because they had some closure to an oddity that vexed them. The problem is when you can't when you can't unvex someone, they just have to live with what they saw and have to wrap their head around it, whatever it may be, because we cannot find an explanation.
Now, what about I'm sure it happens the other way too, where someone doesn't want to listen to your prosaic explanation and
Yeah,
they'd rather it be aliens?
right. Yeah. And there's really not much you can do about that. Uh, you write up your report and you get back with them and tell them what it most probably was, and it was not what they thought it was. We can prove that it was this, and every once in a while I've heard people write back and say, "Well, I know it wasn't that." Here's one case that really sticks with me. It was a lady who made a breathless report that she saw a cat in the clouds. And so when I talked with her, you know, it was a cat because if you watched for a few more minutes, it would turn into a rabbit. And then when you looked at it, it would turn into a buffalo and float off. And it was a clear case of pareidolia. But for some reason, the lady just couldn't really go with that. And she kept saying, but it was a cat. It was a cat in the clouds. And, I just kind of disengaged from that one because for her, it was a cat in the clouds. And I don't know exactly what that meant to her, but there wasn't anything I was going to change about it. But
Yeah.
I was satisfied with what it was.
Right. Yeah. Now,
What are you going to do?
Right. And what is the team that works? Now, I know we've had Paul Carr on this show, and
Yeah.
he works at the Goddard Space Center.
Yeah.
Or he did. I'm pretty sure he still
He's a
does. Right?
space systems engineer. He's a
Yes.
real bright guy. I enjoy Paul a lot. I do a podcast with him every once in a while as a little guest. He has a lot of very interesting characters plopped down in on the Unseen podcast. And we have an opportunity to just riff about science things. And so he's a real bright guy, and I get a lot of information from him, and we interact a lot. And then, of course, so he's the deputy director of API, and Antonio Paris is a professor of astronomy, and he's the director. And Antonio has been very busy just finishing up his dissertation. So that pretty much comprises a team. When we first started out in 2011, as a little background, now I was a member of MUFON there in the Baltimore, Washington area, and Antonio was also a member of MUFON, but he was growing greatly disenchanted with the less than scholarly approach that many of the MUFON places were taking. Not all, but some. They kind of are autonomous the way they run their particular state agency, it would seem. I'm very happy with my Michigan MUFON group. I see them about, every once in a while. But so Antonio, coming from an investigative background, where he was very deep into it and very nailed down, he thought he could do a better job of more scientifically working witness sightings. So he sent out an email to a lot of people on the MUFON area, email list, contact list, and asked who would be interested in becoming part of a new investigative group. So he put together this presentation, and a group of us landed at this place, and he showed us a very nice presentation and told us what it was he wanted to try to accomplish. And it was essentially under the whole umbrella of, as Paul and Antonio have said, draining the swamp of UFO scatology. But so we're trying to drain the swamp, he says, and what he would do is he would train us on how to approach an investigation. He had a system in place, and we would work that system and take cases first all together. So he would train us, and then eventually we'd be on our little training wheels, and then we'd be off on our own. So the first group, some of them fell away because he emphasized this isn't a UFO club. We're not going to sit here and talk about UFOs and what different kind of aliens there may be. That just isn't it. So if you want that kind of thing, this isn't your place. So essentially, a group goes out because they didn't want to investigate. They wanted to chitty-chat about aliens. That wasn't the venue. And so then it kind of ended up being a group of maybe about 8 to 10. There in the Baltimore, Annapolis, Washington area, and we worked a lot of very interesting cases. And then Antonio got this really good job down in Florida. So, of course, he had to go there. And I ended up retiring in 2014, and I was not staying in the Baltimore, Washington area. So, we made our great escape up to northern Michigan. And there were a group of people who were not really staying in touch. Through the ether, we'd have our group meetings once a month on Google Plus Hangouts, and some just fell away because they were not interested in working this long distance. So after a few attritions, we had a death and deaths in the family. It's come down to the core group right now is just Paul and Antonio and myself. And I'm sure once Antonio finishes that dissertation, which takes an awful lot of time, in addition to all the things he's doing as a professor, and in addition to the things he's doing, trying to figure out if he has an answer for the Wow Signal podcast that happened in 1977, which is a very interesting thing. In addition to all that, he's very busy, so it's just a core group of 3.
Yes, and recently there was those radio blasts they're trying to figure out. I'm sure you've probably heard about that. There are sequential blasts that are some type of radio signals that they're trying to figure out. It's something kind of new and exciting. I've been trying to reach Seth Shostak to see if he's been looking into that
Yeah,
part of it.
they pinpointed the area of the universe it's coming from, probably down to the galaxy, and now they're trying to figure out what it might be.
Yeah, so you know a bit about that.
Yeah. I think we talked about that a little bit about that on the Unseen podcast, things of that nature, and other anomalous stuff. Paul's very interested in and really following the Tabby star thing.
Oh no, this is something.
This is something different, I know,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was I remember we discussed something like that at
Yeah.
the same time he was talking about the Tabby star. So
I see.
he's a real science nut. I am not a scientist. I leave that to him, that part.
Yes. So it's just the 3 of you. So what happens? Are you getting like an influx of reports? People that happen to find you on the web, or how does that work?
Yeah, the reports come into our website, which I gave you the link on. It's aerial-phenomenon.org. And there you can make a report. So you make that report and put X amount of data down and send that in. That goes to Antonio. Antonio sends it to me. I'm the chief of investigations. So I track all those cases. I make up the case files. I will do the initial contact with the witness, and I manage the caseload. I assign investigators when needed. I do an awful lot of triage work on my own rather than to assign this out to, at this point, Paul or Antonio, who's very busy, and I'm retired. I can do a lot of that stuff real easy. Was it a meteor? Was it a bolide? What is ISS? Was it a weather balloon? Those things like that I can nail down pretty quick on my own. We probably get about 2 a week of reports.
And so as far as you must have like information for where the ISS when it orbits and where it is, and also weather data,
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah, you really put together an investigative toolbox, and a lot of that is, just smartphone applications.
Really?
You can
Wow.
tell when the ISS will fly over any given point at any given time just by putting at time coordinates, UTC, and latitude and longitude. Or you can ask, when will the ISS fly over me? And it'll tell you exactly when it's going to be. And often when the ISS flies over, it does it on several consecutive nights at a different slight latitude, because you're rolling through space. And it's pretty easy when somebody says they saw something that I'm pretty suspicious is the ISS. I write back and say, take a look tomorrow at this time and see if you see the same light. And if you do, then I think we've nailed down that what you saw was the International Space Station flying over. So, yeah, there's an awful lot of tools, weather tools, and when satellites will be where, and different links you can look at for past UFO activity and see if anything correlates to one you have. The internet, is just what a repository. There's nothing you
Absolutely.
can't find on the internet.
Right. So you mentioned that you work with New Fork. Did I hear you say
I
that?
don't work, well, yes, I go to the New Fork link. And, if I got a case from Idaho, I'll go to the New Fork link and take a look at what people might have reported from Idaho that may correlate to what I've
I see.
seen as a report, or sometimes, and it's not, that gives you a place to start for information. It isn't the end all be all. It's just a point of reference. It's one of multiple points of reference that you need to pull in and chew on, discard that which isn't sending you anywhere, and then just keep honing in, focusing on, and nailing down what it is. But often, as a good first shotgun approach, you look at the other reporting agencies, New Fork, MUFON, several other places, and I mean they're all over. They're all over. Those are just the really well-known ones. So that's a place to start gathering data. It's a starting point.
Now I think Peter's pretty much got the tiger by the tail with that, with New Fork. I mean, working by himself, the phone calling all the time, and he was pretty fed up the last time I talked to him because he was getting some prank calls, and they just wouldn't stop. So he was having a hard time with that. And I kind of feel bad for him. And I asked him, what is the future? Where, is someone else going to be taking it over? And he says he is putting something in place for that. But that begs the question of, cooperation, and something like that. That phone number gets so many calls per month. It'd be great to see like something merge where there could be the activity. Of course, you're only a 3-person team at this point. But if you have this philosophy that sounds really good and looking at really good research, it'd be great to see something like that, kind of merge with something.
It really would, but it is an absolute David and Goliath task. I mean, it's Lilliputians against the gigantic, who was that guy? Gulliver, and the Lilliputians aren't winning. But, Antonio and Paul and I had a discussion on this not too long ago on one of our API case files. And we were talking about, and Leslie Kane was talking about this in her book. I'm going to point anybody who says to me, and I'll digress here a bit, well, prove to me there are UFOs. And, I'm not proving anything to anyone. I tell them, if you're interested in it, because nothing I tell you is going to make you believe anything you don't want to. If you are really interested, I'll tell you to do one thing. Go read UFOs on the Record by Leslie Kane. You read that, and then we'll come back and have a discussion. Because if you don't even get through that book, I am not wasting 1 ounce of energy on trying to explain to somebody that there really are anomalous activities that have been going on. So we were thinking that if you could get all this disparate information gathered into a database, then that's something for people to start parsing through and chewing on. Now, 3 people sitting here doing it on their spare time is not going to work. This would have to be a concerted effort. And this is kind of where I think most people are finding our issue now is this backup of data all over the place that has not been collated and parsed out. You throw out the stuff that's clearly crap and start inputting that in some type of database whereby learned people who know how to get through this data and get usable information can begin to get usable information. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I don't think it will be an ad hoc committee that will do that. It's going to have to be somebody who has the resources, the time, and the energy, and the will to do that, because it is huge.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I can't, what can, like, for instance, just going back to what Peter, he has all those reports come in. I think he does delegate them out. I'm not sure if it's MUFON
Oh, he would
members.
have to. That's an unfathomable task for
Yeah,
one person to do.
yeah,
It just
absolutely.
he might have to get rid of his telephone. They might not have a hotline. You might have to send an instant message, a text to this number, because if it gets to where the kooks or the hoaxers or the nefarious types just keep pestering him with junk, and he can't go about the business of inputting data in his system. He may be forced to cut the telephone thing and just take all written data.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
We'll see how that see how that goes.
I can't even imagine how he does that and how he's done that all this time, but that he really, really, really is dedicated. I mean, my hat's off to him. What a man.
Right, right. Do you actually have a phone number listed anywhere on your website, or is it just through?
No,
Yeah.
no, we don't have a phone number.
All right. So,
No.
so let's talk about some of the cases that you've explored that are interesting. Are you able to say that some of the cases have not been solved?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. When you look at let me give you kind of a background here. We get, as I said, since we started late 2011, let's call it 2012, we had about 500 cases. Now, looking through those, roughly about 1/3 of these cases, um, people say, I don't want this investigated. I just wanted to drop this information in your lap because they want to get it out. So 1/3 don't request an investigation. 1/3, after you start working the case, they stop responding because you sometimes have to get back to them several times when information has led you to a certain point, and there might be information that is at odds. So once you call back or get in touch several times, they just say, look, I don't really need an investigation, or they won't even give you that. They just don't answer the emails anymore or whatever. So 1/3 drops out. About 1/3 then is investigated. And out of that group that's investigated, I was looking just the other day in preparation for this, and I found that um, the majority of findings of what is investigated to completion is lens flares or optical artifacts from cameras often. And it happens far more than people realize. But what typically cues you in is when person says, I didn't see this when I took the picture, but it was there magically. And that's, bink, your first big red flag is you didn't see it because this is something that took place internally. The camera and the way it sees the world is different than the way the human sees the world. And so it throws up, lens flares or other little optical artifacts. Or we had a case not too long ago where a guy saw he'd been taking a picture of their fall yard, and they just finished cleaning up the yard. And so he took this picture and he said, I have this anomaly. It looks like there is this creature floating in the air above the house. And so we took a look at that, and Paul was the one that says, you know what? Look at the color. That is a fall leaf that happened to fall down just when he captured that, and it was slightly twisted and slightly blurred, and it appeared to be hovering over the house when indeed it was well close to him. And I wrote that back and said, we're darn sure that this was not a hovering entity, but most likely an oak leaf that fell down. And that guy never got back to me. He didn't say, oh, and he'd written, like, I'm a scientist and I know these things are not typical, but I saw this and that. And so the scientist, who was quite certain that he had caught a hovering alien, didn't really want to get back and own that one. So that type of thing. Now, the next one that we find often is known aerial objects, and those are probably the easiest ones to find. That's like high altitude weather balloons, and it's astonishing how big science balloons are, how big and how high and how often they are traversing the sky during the daytime. So it's balloons, planes, helicopters, sky lanterns, birds that are captured, in kind of a slow-mo blur, low-flying ham balloons. People will fly ham balloons, and I know a lot of mylar balloons I see that have become slightly deflated, and so now they're in odd shapes and they're wrinkling and floating through the sky, and those are common things. Next would be meteors and bolides, and they're real easy to find because if you go to the American Meteorological Society, you will see an entire list of 15 or 20 people who report that bolide blew up over at that exact same time where this guy could see. Then under that would be the ISS or satellite flyovers, which is another easy thing to find. Then weather phenomenon, which is probably not as common as I would have thought for an explanation. Pareidolia and apophenia is a common thing, and that is just mechanisms inside the human mind and the brain, and that's how our human mind and brain got ordered. We see patterns and things and take them to mean something, or that's apophenia. If you take it to have a special meaning, some strange thing you saw that you take to have an undue special meaning, everybody else would say, look, that's just a lens flare. And you say, no, this is the Valacon's high fringe area localizer. And so it's hard to dissuade somebody from an apophenia or pareidolia case, but you could throw it out there. Every once in a while, we get what we suspect is psychosis, but we can't diagnose psychosis other than the fact that the person who wrote the witness statement just seems like they can't really be coherent. And very, very seldom have we gotten suspected hoaxes, I'm happy to say.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I've had some really good cases, and I believe they're genuine. And here's the most important one, Martin, that I want to talk about.
Oh, goody.
And I want to talk about it because it got a bad rap, and I want to set the record straight here. Now, back in 2012, I got a case out of Niagara Falls, Canada, that still to this time, I am convinced through due diligence that it remains the only video of an actual visitation of men in black. Now, as far as I know, I am the only person who talked with 3 of 4 witnesses in that case. I talked with them personally, or I corresponded with them in the email. And lots of people have said it's a hoax, and it came out about the same time as a new Men in Black movie or something like that. Part of the problem is that some of the information got sent out wrong. They said, oh, it was a Halloween prank, but it was not. This, I am convinced, was an actual Men in Black visitation to a work site to harangue a man who had made a UFO report. This was, although I did the case in 2012, February 2012, this incident took place in 2008. And so in the fall, October 14, 2008, this man who was a night manager for a hotel on the Canadian side overlooking Horseshoe Falls, and one of the guys who worked there at night were having a cigarette break, looked out and saw a light and thought there was a plane going to crash on Niagara Falls. But indeed, the thing kept coming to them and raised up and went up over them, and it was a gigantic black triangle.
Wow.
And so the witness who put this in was awestruck and ran around the corner to try to find it, and he was struck by this huge center red. I mean, it was right out of Central Casting, black triangle, right out of David Marler. I mean, the guy knows his black triangles. This was that, and it had that center red light going.
Wow.
Just pulsates as it goes over. So this guy's awestruck. He runs back to the other guy. The other guy is like, do not ask me about that. I will never talk about it.
Wow.
Gone back into work, would never talk to my witness about it again. So he was not going to go on the record. He got his brain fried by that. He couldn't go there. So the witness was just shocked by it. And maybe a couple of weeks later, he saw another, not as close and not as, awesome, but he saw another one. Now, he made this report to a guy in the British Columbia area. You may have heard of him, Brian Vike. Now, Brian Vike was a British Columbia area researcher, and that's who you'd go to in British Columbia to make your UFO reports. So Brian Vike made a report on that. And in addition, my witness talked to a newspaper person because there had been a flap over the Niagara Falls area, both sides, U.S. and Canadian, for a period of time during the 2008, in the fall and winter 2008. So it was kind of a big deal there. Now, so now we got fall 2008. And so some things are happening to my witness. Here's another interesting thing that people at one point did not want to put together because it's woo-woo and they don't want to go to woo-woo. They just want to stay with nuts and bolts. But this witness had begun to have what are commonly considered paranormal type events, rapping on walls and somebody walking and being no one there and the phone ringing and nothing happening and people walking in his attic when no one was home and he'd go up in there, just that type of thing. So this goes on. And then now this point of time, we're at Mother's Day, 2014, Mother's Day, 2009. That's May 14. This guy who would normally be at work that day decided to take his wife and his mother to Mother's Day dinner. So he kind of last minute says, "Oop, I'm not going to work. I'm taking my women out to a hard-earned Mother's Day dinner." So he wasn't there, and in come that day this group of men in black in May 2009. And, well, it scared the bejesus out of the people who were there, and most particularly this one man in black of the two came to a desk where you go, when you want to know what can I do around Niagara Falls, and they hand out a few pamphlets.
Yeah.
Yes. So these two characters, they walk up to this little gal who looked up and was startled by their appearance, and it was recounted to the witness the next day. I mean, they were all abuzz about, good God, you wouldn't believe these two characters that came in to see you. So she was very, very, very frightened. And the security manager of that airport, of that hotel, the security manager said to my witness, I happened to catch that on our security footage. Would you like to look at it? So yeah. So they look at it and said, wow, that's really something. They saw him coming, but they never really, he never got anything of them leaving. But the bellman there that is seen in the video, are you familiar with this video?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay. All right. Well, if you Google Men in Black in Canadian hotel or something like that, you'll find that. Okay. So these guys leave, and the witness finds out about it the next day. The security manager says, I saw it. And the witness says, well, could you burn that off? So, yeah, he could. But so he burned off a data disk of that video, and he gave it to Shane. And he gave it to the witness. The witness could never get that video to play. So now this is 2009 spring. And so I guess he saw our website or something like that, or Antonio had been on a talk show. So in December or January 2012, he puts a witness statement in on that, and I begin the investigation. And offhanded, he said, I happen to have video of that. And I said, what? So I said, well, send that to me. He says, but I can't get it to play. I don't think it works. And I said, well, just send it to me anyway. And I said, and send it the most secure way you can. And I think out of Canada, that dang thing costs $50 to get sent with tracking and all that. But at any rate, so I get it. So I have a computer literate friend, and we took a look at it, and we determined it was a proprietary file on proprietary software that is used in a hotel system. So she went out on the web, found that proprietary software, downloaded it, put the disc in, up pops through the skin of this proprietary software this footage of the one camera in the lobby that tracked these two characters walking in. And so I did a screen catch of that on my computer and put together a report with the witness's statement and made a video report and released that to Coast. And so it got a pretty good amount of airplay with, a fair amount of people saying, oh, that's just hoax and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, folks, until something changes, am quite certain that was actual somebody's, not fakery or people playing a stunt, because they had some aspect of them that was scary to be in proximity to. So that is probably my favorite case.
Yeah.
When it comes to having footage that backs up a witness statement, a secondary statement, a tertiary statement of a case. I'm very proud of that one, and you can say what you will of it. Believe it or not, I don't care. It changes nothing in the facts behind that case.
Someone in the chat room just checked it out, and they said it looks like the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, it
that is bizarre.
wasn't.
I mean, the whole thing of Men in Black, so many cases over the years, and it goes much further back than when the movies came out. It has nothing to do with the movies, actually.
I know. And the man's name escapes me now, but he's made his whole career Men in Black guy. What's his name?
Are you talking about Will Smith?
No, the researcher. He's a British guy.
Oh, no, I know. I know there is. I know Nick Redfern's done some work in it.
Yes, Nick Redfern. Okay, Yeah, Nick Redfern doesn't have that case.
Yeah.
That's a real case, Nick.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you another one. That case, when it was recounted about how the lady behind the desk so oddly reacted to these two characters, that triggered a case that came in that I ended up calling. I think we covered this in our API case files, episode 3. We called the Plastic Soldiers. That was another case of mine that was an amazing case. And some of these things, Men in Black, like you said, what is that? What is that? That is so. We're still trying to figure out what aerial phenomena is that disappears like that, or turns on a dime, or leaves so fast that the eye cannot perceive the trail. We're still trying to figure that out. And then there's ancillary weirdness associated with all of this that I tell you, you don't know where to put it. The mind reels. Here is a case where the mind reels. This guy got in touch with me in April 2014, and this thing happened in the summer of 2001. He knows it was shortly before 9/11. So this is a kid traveling with a friend, and he's going from San Diego to some point in Arizona, Scottsdale, traveling Interstate 8. So he's traveling along Interstate 8, and they pull into this little out-of-the-way place off the highway to go get a Coke and a few little snacks. And so one guy stays with the car. Witness 2 stays with the car. Witness 1 goes in. And he noticed when he went in, there were a couple of troop carriers, and he's really into military because his familial history is very into the military. He had a father in the military, a grandfather, and he was thinking strongly at that time of going in. So he goes in and he looks very closely at the BDUs, the battle dress uniforms, and he's noticing all these recruits that are lined up one after the other. He says 8 or 10 of them, in a line, standing at the cash register, and they all have a bottle of water. So he thinks, well, okay, they're really squared away. And he looked at, the starch on the BDU fatigues and all that, and he gets his water and he queues up behind these guys. And he's just kind of looking around, and he's looking at the back of this guy, and he says, I started looking at the back of this recruit's head, and it looked like a Barbie doll plastic skin. And he said, and I was trying to figure out what that could be. And then he kind of looks down the line and begins to notice everybody's skin in everybody's hat is this Barbie doll plastic material. And so he thinks, wait a second. And so he says, okay, I'm going to go to the front and pretend to ask this gal there at the cash register something. I'm going to go look at their face. So he goes that way, and he comes back, and every one of the recruits, bam, their cap, is right down over their eyes, and he looks at their faces. He said every one of those soldiers was an exact replica. So at that point, he's lost it, and he drops his stuff, and he goes out, and he says, dude, go in and go take a look at those soldiers in line, and you tell me what you see. And the guy says, he says, I'll finish that up. You go in and take a look at that. So the guy says, all right. He goes in. He takes a look, and he says, this isn't right. And he comes back out, and he says, those guys aren't even human. Let's go. And so off they go. Now, the one kid, witness one, says, this was just, he couldn't just leave it at that. So they go down the road, and they wait a little bit. Now, this is where it gets even weirder, Martin. They wait a little bit, and here comes this troop carrier with all these plastic soldiers in it. And they diverge off the interstate, and they're traveling. They're going overland, and they're headed towards this kind of hill, and they're watching them, wondering where they're going to go. They disappear inside the hill, and there is no hole. And that was it. These guys were get to where we're going. And the other guy, I ended up interviewing him. I got 2 witness statements. Both those witnesses corroborated that story. Now, witness one was exceedingly flummoxed over it, because he'd had other experiences, and his family had other experiences. And this was just another one of those things that just, you have an anomaly box, I call it. Some people do. I do. And you toss those things in there, and you get them out of your psyche by just tossing them in this little box that you won't worry about because you don't have an answer and you aren't going there. After a while, that anomaly box, the lid falls off, and these contents fall out, and you have no choice but to kind of look at them before you plop them back in. And as in my case and many others, when you look at them, you start to throw them out, and they make kind of this strange trail that you don't really want to follow, but there it is. So this kid, he could not really let that go for a long time. It's not that it drove him nuts, but it was so extraordinary that happened in 2001. And he recounted that to me on the telephone as if it were the day before.
Wow.
So that was another one. And
yeah. Now that they actually, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with UFOs, they actually contact you?
Yes. He contacted me because of the witness statement from the men in black at the Niagara Falls
I see.
Desk. The way she felt and what she saw of the men in black skin, it didn't look real. They didn't blink. Their hair looked like it was fake. You could pick it off and toss it like a toupee. So the same visceral fear and anxiety and inability to cope with that experience triggered this kid's experience, and he related that. And that one, I had 2 corroborating witnesses. There was no way I could prove that, but I did not feel, it was, in my opinion, an undetermined case. And, we get rid of an awful lot of goofy stuff and a lot of stuff that is a very interesting story. But look, if there was a single witness, and if this thing happened at night, and you can't remember the date, and you don't really, there isn't a there. You don't have things you can hang an investigation on.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to this interesting story, until he told me he had a witness to corroborate that. Then bing, okay, this could make an investigation. So that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
I have a couple more. Do we have time?
Oh, yeah. We have plenty of time. We're just at the first hour right now.
So this is another story, and this I ended up not being able to finish because the girl I was working with, the last time I talked to her on the phone, she said, "Look, things are getting really weird around here, and I'm afraid to talk to you anymore about this, and I will not answer the phone." And she hung up. And this was after 3 calls where she relayed a story and a photo of one time. Now, this was in Florida. This thing occurred January 30, 2011 at 10 p.m., and she made this report July 2012. So it stuck in her craw for a while, and she finally, lots of times people don't get over these things until they eject them, until they can tell someone else and get them out. It's almost as if, when you're sick and you finally regurgitate, you can walk away and say, okay, I think that's cleared. I can go on. Yeah. Literally, it is like that for some people. It has so affected them. So this gal, she was in her room going to sleep. It was bedtime, and she had a couple of dogs, and one dog liked to sleep with her. So she was curled up, getting ready to go to sleep. The light was off, and she felt this dog crawl up. And she said, "Come here, Fido or whatever your name. Come on, crawl up here." And the dog didn't move. And so she kind of moved her leg, and it was heavier than normal. And when she realized it was heavier than normal and it wasn't her dog, she said something triggered a deep, deep terror in her. And she just was instantaneously scared. And she had her cell phone there, and she picked it up, and out of fear, she couldn't even turn her light on. She just went like down there where the crook of her leg was, where this thing was. So she opened the phone and saw the picture and could remember nothing until she found herself an hour or so later on the couch, sitting up.
Weird.
And she had no explanation for that, and it scared her terribly. And she looked at that photo, and it was hard to see, but when you apply filters to the photo, which I did upon investigation, the damnedest creature popped out and was visible to the naked eye. And I've never seen a creature like that ever, talked about or drawn. It did have the almond eye shape, but there was a thing about its nose. You usually think of gray aliens as having no nose, but it was curled up in the crook of her arm like this, right? I mean, her leg, the crook of her leg. And literally, right, you see my head here and my eyes and nose, and that's what she caught. It was crooked up in her knees and looking up at her, and she took this photo. These were 2 large almond eyes. It was a small head. It wasn't a normal size head. It was small, about like, a dog size head, really. And it had this almost small but bulbous nose. It was the strangest creature. And when I was doing the investigation on that, at a point in time, she said, "Look, I can't talk about it anymore. I can't go any further in investigation." She says, I'm not going to answer the phone anymore. And I do not believe that was a hoaxed photo. I believe it was something genuine, but again, it was an undetermined. But that one stuck with me simply because the photo evidence, which I could not see, was tampered with.
Now, are these?
Striking.
Pardon me. Is any of this information available on the website, like images or anything like that?
That picture would not be available. The case would be available, but the picture would not be available because I never got to the point where I was given permission to use it. So I have not.
Yeah.
I would like to. It was awesome. Maybe I would call the gal again. I don't know, but you have to respect when they say, "Look, I can't go there anymore." You just have to respect that. So that may not ever see the light of day. I don't know.
Right.
Another one that I found very reliable, and I got to know this kid, was a case where he had found what he felt was an artifact slightly embedded in his arm. And the backstory on that was he'd had odd little experiences, but he was in Ocean City, Maryland, in a condominium with his family, and a lot of people go up there from the Washington D.C. area, and he was vacationing, and he woke up from a dream that he'd been talking with something, and he said that he found this kind of blue-colored, furry, troll-like creature crouched down by the side of his bed looking up at him, and he'd had a sense they'd had a conversation. Now, I know this goes to woo-woo world, but he felt that they had had this conversation, and that he further recalled that he had had interactions with some type of thing before and hadn't really remembered it. And he did not remember the conversation, but he finally kind of came to. He might have fallen back asleep and the thing was gone, but not too much later, he can't remember, he went up to go to the bathroom, and in his arm, he found this little artifact, this sliver of an object slightly embedded in his arm that he pulled out and examined. It was slightly delta-shaped. And he could not figure out what that was. And he went around and asked his family, do you have any clue what this is? And no, we have no idea what that is. And so something tells him before he flicks it into the wastebasket, he says, something tells me to just wrap that up. So he put that in a piece of plastic that he had sitting on the bureau there. He put it in a little baggie, goes like this, just regular sandwich bag. And he puts it in the bureau down. He puts his wallet on top and closes the bureau. He goes about his day. He comes back that evening and he pulls that baggie out, and that artifact is missing. Oh. And where it had been in the corner was a burnt area of this plastic, and this thing was gone. So we did a report on that. In fact, we even presented that during the API UFOCon 2013. It was one of our cases, because we were hosting during that a group of people who felt that they were experiencers. And so this was part of a UFOCon presentation, and I did that presentation on the witness and what he said occurred, and Paul Carr did the analysis on the baggie. And, he took a spectrograph to it and all that type of thing. I mean, he's a scientist. And he could determine that heat had been applied at an area, but he could not determine what kind of heat. He could not, determine what had caused that. He couldn't say there had been anything there, but it was puzzling at this baggie, if indeed it was the baggie that this guy said he had, was burnt, and we had no explanation what burnt it and why what had been there had teleported away somehow. So I found that an interesting one. One other one before I'm doing right now, there was an incident in Tukwila, Washington, and the guy had video of, and I released the video on a tweet one time, and also we might have that at the website. But this took place in December 27, 2014, Tukwila, Washington, which is a southern suburb of Seattle. And a guy had gone to the post office. He looked up in the sky, and he saw dark clouds and these little kind of what he thought at first might be ashes from a burning building that were up there, decaying, And he looked up, and some guy passed by, and he says, do you see those too? This guy says to him. And this witness says, yeah. And the man who walked past him said, it's funny, they aren't moving. And this witness said that was strange, because they were moving. They were undulating throughout the clouds as if they were birds that were swarming in a little area. You know how seagulls sometimes will swarm together? Yeah. And there was one bunch of 4 or 5 swarming, and you could see it in the video. And then he panned over, and there was another bunch of 4 or 5 swarming. And so I said, well, send me that. I'll take a look at it. And so when I examined it, when you go in close and you apply certain filters that allows a shape to become more objectified and stand out more. These shapes were round. They were not like a bird would be. And I could find no explanation for what those were. It was undetermined, but it did send me, that case sent me off on a real research into the fourth state of matter that we know very little about. Plasma. You know, we don't know plasma. The best we know right now is that we can make it for short periods of time in a lab, or we can observe it every once in a while. If we happen to catch it in unique conditions, we can observe a plasma ball. And we know that, it's made up of gases that will follow a charge through the atmosphere. So I was wondering if this was, just kind of riffing on stuff. I was thinking, I wonder if this was an example of a plasma type entity, for lack of a better term, that took place in certain conditions because it was stormy conditions. It had rained. It was roiling black clouds. And maybe, again, this is just conjecture, just thought, just exercising the muscle. What if changes in the atmosphere have occurred in that chemicals that did not used to be in our atmosphere down near where we live, there's more of one type than had been in the past. There was some discussion some time back, and there still is, about chemtrails. I don't know much about that. There's a lot of conspiracy around that. But they proffer that there is chemicals being thrown out in the atmosphere for whatever reason. Nobody knows, because it might not even be true. But so I was thinking, what if somehow our atmosphere has changed slightly to where plasma might form more readily, might have conditions that are more conducive to forming in an atmosphere and dissipating or have what they need. These things were up there, he said, 8, 10, 12 seconds before he even got his camera out, and then we're gone in about 5 seconds or so. They just, he was shooting there, shooting, what is that? And then the video ended, and he said they left, just gone. So that,
Yeah.
You hear about orbs all the time, right?
You do. You hear about them more than ever.
Yeah.
I know there's a segment of MUFON that's kind of broken off. Erica Luke, she's going to be on in a few weeks. That is actually really looking into them, more deeply.
She's in Utah, right?
That's correct.
Yes, I follow her. She's got her stuff nailed down.
Right. A couple of questions that came up on the chat room while you were speaking, and one of them is, what was your role in the Air Force?
Oh God, I had the best job in the Air Force. I just, through fate, thank you, Jesus, I ended up in the Air Force because my parents did not have the money to send me to college, and I didn't have what it took to go to college at that time. So I decided to join the Air Force. Prior to going in, now this was 1975, and women were just starting to go in. They had wound down from the Vietnam era, and so they thought, well, Congress is making them put women in now, so let's get women in. And I had an interest in photography, and that kind of dovetailed into the nascent industry of videotape. So when I was a young girl, after I graduated high school, I took some night classes in photography and videotape. So cut to the Air Force. I wait, and they're going to call me in on delayed enlistment, and they call a couple times. We could take you in right now. How would you like to be working in the post office? I said, no, I don't think so. So finally they said, we're going to have to take you in. You're going to get whatever you get. And I said, that's fine. That's cool. I don't have anything else to do. So I go into the Air Force, and part of the things they do in were you in the military, Martin?
No.
Okay. Well, many of your audience, I'm sure it was. So part of what you do is You go in there and they take all your clothes. They throw a set of clothes at you. They get everybody configured into one line mentally and physically. And at a point in time, after you learn how to march right, they toss you over to this one building and says, okay, now we need bodies for certain things in the Air Force. We need a bunch of security police, we'll take you. We need a bunch of cooks, we'll take you. Now, by the way, if anybody here has any special abilities or schooling, you let us know. So I said, I'd have photography and videotape stuff. Okay, well, good. So they sent me over to this place. This place says, read this dialogue. So it turned out to be a script. So I read the script. I've always been very good in English. So I read the script and said, okay, this bunch is going to security police. They will be guarding B-52s in Fargo or whatever. You go off over here. So I went there and I was trained to be a radio and television broadcaster.
Wow.
And so after military boot camp was over, then I got sent with a few lucky others to this school in Fort Benjamin Harris. It was an Army school in Indiana. And I went through an entire course taught by industry professionals on how to write script, read script, run camera, direct radio and television shows. And I thought, my God, I've hit the lotto here. And I did. And so from that point on, I spent all but 1 year of my 14 years of active duty overseas.
Wow.
Because they didn't need us in the States. In the States, a soldier or an airman or a Marine can flip on a channel and they see anything in English. But overseas, when you've got a captive horde of military members and their dependents living on base and off, they don't know Japanese and they don't know Turkish. So the base there then sends through the air, it was at the time through the air, they would send a television signal to outlying areas and to all the houses on base. And we were their radio, television, news, and entertainment and information. And so that's what I did. I had a great career. My husband and I were both in that field, and we got stationed together for all but one tour. If there's anybody listening out there that was in the military, I'll mention this so some people will know.
Okay, well, while you're doing that, I have another question.
Oh, yes, okay.
Came up, someone wanted to know, and this could be personal, and you don't have to answer it, but they want to know what your husband thinks about UFOs.
He's very open to it, open to it, because he and I both have had anomalous experiences.
And that was my next question.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
He on occasion, now he's a real button-down guy, but he's not your typical, I shouldn't say anything typical. He's very open. He's very open-minded and very supportive. He has never looked at me and said, I'm a kook. Now, the only time that ever happened was early on. I won't tell a whole story because it's just too long and it's too personal. But, I told you about my anomaly box?
Yes.
Okay. So after a while, some of these things kind of had to be dealt with. So I began to kind of deal with things that I thought I could deal with at the time. And one of them was having to do with what is termed, for lack of a better philosophy, I guess, reincarnation, the idea behind reincarnation. And oddly, both my husband and I had an occurrence where we felt, I barely knew this guy, my husband, but something occurred where we thought we got together again. It took us to go all the way to the Republic of Turkey in 1975 to meet again. And when we met, we knew it. It's you, there you are. And from that point on, we have flown just absolutely perfectly matched through life together.
Wow.
So,
good for you.
Yes, he's pretty supportive of that because he's had a few himself. Not like mine, and that he recalls or anything. But yes, very supportive, thank God.
Now, I know you were going to say one thing about the military, and then I wanted to ask you about something about Turkey while we hit that subject.
Yeah, well, there's people in the military that they're going to love hearing these names. So in 76 to 77, I was at Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. Loved that place. When I first got there, I didn't know Turkey was a country. I thought you just ate it during Thanksgiving. And that was my first assignment out of boot camp. Loved it. Then for 1 year, I went to Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, and I worked in public affairs there, which is, I hate that job. But there's a lot of people in the Air Force that get trained in Biloxi for air traffic control. They are taught how to vector planes in. Then I went back to Turkey because they couldn't get people to volunteer for Turkey because it was such an awful assignment, people thought, but I loved it. So we went back, 79 to 81, Incirlik. 81 to 84 was Yokota Air Base, Japan. And 84 to 85 was Keflavik Naval Station, Iceland. It was all services there. 85 to early 90 was Ramstein Air Base, and that's when I got out of the military. Right after the Berlin Wall fell in the fall of 89, the military was looking to draw down because, wow, we won the Cold War. Who wants to get out? And I thought, well, you know, my husband and I had bought a house in Germany, and we were living there because the military paid us a housing allowance. Now we could throw it away on rent, or we could toss it into a home that would build equity. So we bought a home in Germany. And when they said, who would like to get out? My husband had retired. And I thought, hey, I will go out now. And then, boom. So I got discharged and got an immediate job as a military broadcaster, as a civilian broadcaster with the military at AFN Frankfurt. And so from 85 until 1990, we lived in Germany, and I was a civilian from May of 90 to 98, living in Germany. Loved that place very much. And these people, they might hear, oh yeah, I was in Germany then. Just loved it.
Yeah,
Loved
sounds wonderful.
Now, what do you want to know about Turkey?
Yes, I wanted to know if you ever looked into what is known as the Turkey or Turkish UFO.
That thing over the Strait of Marmara?
I think that's what it was. I know it was over water.
That's awesome. I don't know what to make of that, but it seems to me that a panel of learned Turks, and make no mistake, there are some smart, Turks are smart. They looked that over real good, those scientists, and they could not explain that. I don't know what to think about. What do you think, Martin?
Well, there was someone that came forward and said it had to do with something inside of a camera lens, but there is someone that's been researching that for a long time that says that doesn't hold any water at all. So I just wondered if you had heard anything about that.
No, I hadn't.
Yeah. I know it's really weird because it also shows what looks like a couple of beings at one point, almost like grays, with big heads. And then there's another picture where one of the heads is leaned a little bit. How that could be anomaly inside of a camera, I have no idea.
I watched it and I don't know what to make of it. I don't know anything. That's my mantra. I know nothing.
That's really a really good mantra, actually, because I feel the same way. I'm sure you get email. I get email about my shows, and a lot of times people will say something, sarcastic, like "You don't know anything," and I reply, "You're absolutely right."
Yeah.
And I think that anyone that claims that they know exactly what's going on, you probably want to stay away.
Well, some may know. I don't know. I suspect there are Homo sapiens that do know some things. The old Rumsfeld little quizzical saying, which I love, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. There are known unknowns, and there's people walking here that probably do know what a lot of us don't know. By hook or by crook, I don't know. But this phenomenon has been around for so long that you would think somebody would know something.
Yeah, you would think so. I know, and I've had a lot of conversations about this and with different people, and is it possible that there's some small portion of the government need-to-know basis that knows something about this? And what the answer is, I don't know. You know?
Well, there again, Leslie Kean's book, that was a 5-star read because of how salient the information was in that book, and the characters behind it were generals and pilots and people that they aren't tinfoil wearing wackadoos.
Yeah. Yeah.
These guys are professionals. It is their job to know what they happen to see in the sky. So it lends some credence, some weight, some scholarly weight to it. I just have been very happy with that book. But, even though that book came out, still I don't know yet if it's nudged the needle to where scientists will make a concerted effort to look at this. I came across this guy that was mentioned in that book. Just let me get my notes here. Yeah, this Dr. Alexander Wendt, who
Oh, yes. I know him.
he had a
Yeah.
yeah he had a chapter in that book, and he and another colleague, Raymond Duvall, they published this paper called Sovereignty in the UFO. And in it, they drilled down as to why, after all this time, people will still say, just be completely dismissive of anything about the UFOs. Not even, that is weird. We should look at it. No, science just goes, whoop, they're gone.
Yeah.
I was talking with Paul about that conundrum, and it aggravates Paul and Antonio too. But the both of them will say, "My God, they aren't going to walk up to a colleague and say, well, tell me if you've seen a UFO." Still, it's a bugaboo in their business, and like Paul said, it's a third rail. So there is. And what this Sovereignty in the UFO by Alexander Wendt, who wrote a really good book, by the way, too, what it kind of drilled down to, it had to talk about the anthropocentric attitude of us, that we're all that is. And if we aren't all that is, that means we no longer have sovereignty. And if we no longer have sovereignty as governments or governmentals, then we lose control. And it's kind of akin to an organism would not take the steps that would end up annihilating itself. So in a way, the governments are kind of these organisms. When you look at them in a social science way, they are an organism that wants to maintain its structure and its being. And so they're thinking, it's like, the camel's head in the tent. If you allow the head in the tent, real darn soon, the whole thing's going to be in there. So don't let the camel's snout through the tent. And that you can pretend there isn't even a camel there. So that really answered the UFO taboo to me. It's an organism that cannot allow its annihilation. I mean, that's certainly one possibility. Again, they allow us why don't we just be agnostics about this? Why do we have to say, oh no, ET could not be here because we haven't figured out how to make a wormhole activate what it could to make this happen? Don't just be, we don't know. We can't prove it one way or the other, but hide our head in the sand and say, no, it doesn't exist, when hundreds of thousands of people over centuries have made essentially the same type of plea to their fellow man. Believe me, I just saw this, or this just happened to me.
Yeah.
We cannot dismiss that, and we can't answer it, because powers and the requirement that is needed to put a scientific machine together with all the disciplines that can sally forth, munch in this information, toss out which isn't appropriate or credible, and glean from that real information that, as you know, NARCAP has real information about radar paintings on things in the sky that cannot move. And 2 radars saw it, 2 human beings, and a couple of people from the ground. There's a there. And I don't know what's going to make us look at there scientifically.
I know it really is amazing how like you just said, the science community just seems to run, but not all of them.
No,
You know,
not all of them. Dr. Haynes is a nailed down scientist.
yeah.
And, the guy that's running Heselton,
Oh
the
yes, I can't
he's
think
a
of his name
scientist.
right now. He was
Yeah.
just out in Phoenix. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, he's got a whole scientific team there in Norway. They aren't afraid of training, spectrographs and figuring out what this is made up organically, and they aren't having a problem with that.
I know.
Apparently.
And like you mentioned earlier, the plasma thing. Very
Yeah.
well could be, some type of natural phenomena like that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yes.
But it seems like that's been going on for a long, long time. And there are cases like Brown Mountain. There's another situation where people are seeing, lights and that are,
Yes. Uh-huh.
misunderstood.
Yeah, those are really, really hard to investigate. Lights in the night
Yes.
sky,
Mhm.
seen by one person. I'm sorry, you can tell me your story, but I can't hang an investigation on it.
Yeah.
But I will put your data on our files and we'll upload that, just like New Fork does, and we'll throw it out there, but I have nothing to hang a valid investigation on it. It's
Right.
just a story. Like Antonio said, people need to tell their stories. So they tell us their stories, and if we have what we can to hang an investigation on it, we will do what we can, and we'll come back with them. What we feel through research and investigation is the most probable answer for what you saw. That's all we can do.
Yeah, yeah. When I had a sighting back in 2006, and that's what really got me. I
Yeah,
sort of
I
had a
read
little
that.
bit of a
Yeah.
interest in it, but that really like nailed it down for me. And but I had no idea on how to report it, or I had no idea there was anything on site. Any websites or anything. I never even looked. So I would imagine there's a lot of people out there in the same situation. They have
That was in like 2008, 2006. What was that?
2006.
Okay, yeah.
2006, but it just like it didn't cross my mind to even look online, but I didn't know where to go, so I called the police department. What I mean? I didn't know who to call, and so I wonder how many people that happens to today, that just I know I've been in an audience, a couple of audiences where the speaker Richard Dolan one and Stan Friedman and another, that both asked how many people have seen what they think is a UFO, and then you see the raise of hands, quite a few hands, and then how many people reported it, and it's about 10%.
Yeah.
So if you do the math with all the reports that come in, monthly or yearly, there's a lot of people seeing something.
Yeah, now drill down even farther in that 10%. How many of you guys wanted an investigation on your sighting? Okay, drill down a little more. How many of you guys actually stayed through to the investigation and you end up with a pittance?
Yeah, yeah.
It's just how it is. It's no one's fault. It's just human nature to a degree.
Yeah. On this sighting we had in the news in the beginning of the show, Alejandro was talking about a story where there was a triangle, pardon me, that in Pennsylvania, with the light on the underside, like you mentioned earlier, that just plain disappeared. And you hear about that a lot, like the vanishing, like you said about the trucks, with the army soldiers just disappearing. And that, when you talk about stuff like that, you can almost think that it might have something to do with a dimension or something. I mean, nothing makes any sense either way. Of course, if someone had the technology to come here from somewhere else, being cloaking or going or disappearing, so to speak, is probably a pretty easy capability.
I hear what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying there. In fact, I just read about some gal who saw a flying triangle. She said it was so huge, it had 5 lights. One of those 5 lights, those lights were the size of her house.
Wow.
The light on the thing was well, that's unfathomable. Now, I will tell you a story here. This is my biggest interaction, I would say, with a UFO. Do I have time to tell this
Oh
story?
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. This was when I think it was my first or second tour of Turkey. I can't remember because they were so close together. So it was 79, 80 maybe. And a group of us were out in the village, and the village outside Incirlik Air Base at that point was pretty small. Many years ago. This is 79. And so it was dark, and it's pure skies out there. There's no light pollution. There's no light pollution out there. And one of our friends said, it's going to be the Perseids meteor shower. So let's go out tonight, climb up on our somebody was living out there in the village, and all these village houses have flat roofs because they go up there at night when it's hot and they sleep. So we went up on these flat roofs, and we were looking and said, wow, they were coming in. Have you seen Perseid meteor showers?
Yes.
Okay.
Love it.
It is a real light show, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Boom, there's one. Ching, ching, wow. Look at that. And we were all looking around different, and they were coming in just like artillery. And it was, wow, this is something. Our head was on a swivel. Now, a couple came in at one time. I was looking over this way. Everyone was, a couple came in and fired off at the same time. And these were big, fat bolides, and they went whoosh, and they were out. Now, as I was looking at them up in the sky, this gigantic black slab appeared. And the only reason I knew it was there is because those bolides lit this thing up from the bottom.
Wow.
Meteors come in 60 miles up. A meteor comes in 60 miles up and begins to incandesce. So this thing was higher than 60 miles up. And it threw this shadow up. If you got a big, thick slab like that, square, and you could see that it was square because it threw a shadow up. And I saw that thing, and I tell you, instantly, I was filled with so much terror that I fell to my knees. I was incapable of keeping myself up. And I knew, and I hope not to sound indelicate, I knew at that time, had I had to go to the bathroom, I would have wet myself because I lost every bit of control of me in the fear of having seen that thing. Now, I did not know it was. I've never seen anything before since. I've never seen it written about. But that thing scared me so bad.
Wow.
I fell down with my arms over like that until I gathered myself and said, my God, you guys, did you see that? And they said, what? No. And they're looking at that. And I couldn't even form what it was. And that thing is probably one of the biggest things that I shoved into my anomaly box because, Martin, if that thing that big was lit up from a 60-mile high object, that thing had to be like the size of Manhattan or more, perfectly stock still, there as if it had been painted there. And there was nothing in me that had everything just stopped working. The me just stopped working because I did not know what to make of it. And it took me a second or two to gather myself. And when nobody else saw it, I never thought of it again until years later.
Really?
When I started spreading all that stuff out and I researched, well, how high could that thing have been if it got, and so I found out meteorites were to this day, I don't even know what to make of that.
That's amazing.
But here's an interesting, Bitte? What?
You're not the first person, though. I know you said you put it in your box and
Yeah.
away like that, but you're not the first person that's lost the total recount of something until years later. I've heard that a number of times.
Yeah.
Now, did you notice if it blocked out starlight? That was a question on the chat.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It blocked starlight out. It was just yes.
In that
It
case,
was a
did
big
anyone
black slab.
could anyone see it at any point when
No,
they?
no one saw it but me. No,
Wow.
no one. And because no one else saw it, and because I did not know what it was, and I had no frame of reference for what my eyes just beheld.
Yeah.
Over. Next, you know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have speculated if they know something about physics that we don't know, and they come here from wherever they're coming from, then the size of the craft makes no difference at all. It has nothing to do with any type of propulsion or anything that we know of. It's something entirely different, most likely.
That is, of course, in the ETH philosophy, and that's bandied about a lot now. There's kind of flavors for a period of time on a thought. ETH was a flavor for a long time. Now I'm noticing a lot. There seemed to be kind of a flavor of thought that these might be demons or something like that. So that's kind of roiling through, and
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard people saying that.
I don't know, but I just read a very interesting book by Robert Lanza called "My Mind is Losing Thoughts." Here, see, I made these notes because I've got a gazillion things in my head. Just a second here. Yes. Beyond Biocentrism, Rethinking Time, Space, Consciousness, and the Illusion of Death. Have you read that book, Beyond Biocentrism? Really, anybody listening really needs to read that, because now here's a whole different thought. Do we have time to go?
Sure, yeah. We have.
I don't have any idea of time.
Yeah, okay. We have about 15 minutes or so.
All right. Well, this Beyond Biocentrism, this Dr. Robert Lanza, he and another guy, an astronomer, wrote this book about what if, and this is true in quantum physics, what if everything that we experience is, for lack of a better term, just this virtual reality, that this being that we are is made up of a complement of tactile input, optical input, mind that orders literally incoming packets of electromagnetic energy is all there is out there. And here, through this whole series, animals too, just not human beings, everything is taking in packets of light and making some order out of it, as if we were programmed to see packets of light in a certain structure. That blew my mind. That has kind of some resonance. I don't know where to go with that, but that's just as possible, that there is nothing out there but zipping packets of electromagnetic energy that happens to hit a sensor, and that sensor happens to have a certain set of how to transcode because of this biological entity, and it transcode this information in a certain way, and we all see the same world because Homo sapiens sapien is made up of the exact same mechanism. And so what if things are not necessarily disappearing because they were actually there, as maybe they were never there in the first place, and we're just thinking we see it? I mean, I know nothing. But it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I really enjoy doing this show, is because just hearing so many different opinions on what, could be happening. It's fascinating. Because there's a lot of really intelligent people that look into this.
Yes.
I find. And,
I'm thinking.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, go.
Your turn.
I was going to say that I'm thinking that if we find a tool, if we can, in a toolbox, find the tool that works with quantum physics,
yes,
we might get closer to having an array of scientific tools to go at this enigma in the scientific manner. But right now, I do not believe that any of our toolboxes has the appropriate tool at this point to reach in and tweak into what we're experiencing. But I think quantum physics could get us a tool, maybe.
Very, very possible. And, you know, who knows what they'll discover at CERN? I know that, you know, there's a lot of research there as well, which I think is really fascinating. And I don't really understand exactly how far down you can go to matter. And, you know, is it possible it's infinite? You know, I mean, I don't even, you know, it's crazy when you get down at that level. And
Yes.
quantum entanglement
Smaller
and all
than
that.
quark. Can we find a device that will make visible this matter? I mean, I think they've gotten down to stuff that isn't matter. It's not matter. It has no mass.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
what is that? But it's there, and they found it. Oh, there's just an off. I tweak scientists all the time, especially on Paul's podcast, because scientists are so proud of all that we've learned, and they should be. I mean, we've learned a lot since we drug our knuckles out of the caves. We've learned an awful lot. But I'll tell you what, when it takes what we know from what there is to know, we know nothing.
Yeah. It's just, I agree with you. Like, you know, it's, in some ways we're so primitive, but just the learning part, you know, like people, or a lot of scientists will feel pretty secure that they know the answers, which I think is wrong. Science has to be open, especially when it comes to changing their thoughts when new evidence comes along.
Right.
Something like
Yeah.
that.
And dogma, scientific dogma is
Yeah.
a killer. You know, the old Horace saying, science advances one death at a time.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, that's
you've got
right.
to get,
Yeah.
you've got to get the big dog thought leaders out of the dogma pool if you want to swim down and find something new, because they're pretty much going to keep you paddling around in the part of the pool they know all about. And this was dogma. I know dogma exists in science. I remember going through one of my classes in marketing. And now my husband and I, because we were in the military for so long, couldn't take regular college. So we took college adult classes with a lot of kids who were military dependents. They were 17 and 18, and Mel and I were in our 40s. And so one of these marketing classes, this professor says, now we're going to talk about advertising. And remember, advertising does not create want and desire. Advertising differentiates choices. It merely differentiates choices in the marketplace. At which point, Mel and I said, nah, we call BS on that. We know that advertising creates desire. And the professor looked over it and says, I know, but it's here in the syllabus. I've got to teach that. He said that.
Yeah.
Now, all these 16 and 17-year-olds were writing it right down and buying it right up. But he copped to the fact that, yes, he knows that's not true, but it's here in the syllabus, and he needs to teach that advertising does not create desire and want. So that, my God, can you imagine how rampant that is in
Sure.
physics and biology? And
Yeah.
And they don't even know they're doing it, or they think they're doing it for the right cause, but it's out there and it's a problem, and I don't know how to deal with that one either. That's not my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. I was looking. There was a question up there. I don't have it. So this experience that you had, was that the only one you had when it comes to what you'd consider UFOs?
I had another UFO sighting, and that's that's the second case that API happened to investigate.
Really?
Yeah, because before I had begun, there was a meeting set up for new API members, the first meeting, and that was set here in this point, this date in the future, and we were all going to get together. Might have been November or something like that. And so my husband and I were driving home from Washington, D.C. We lived in the Baltimore area. We were commuters, and we were driving, and it was September 9, 2011. And Mel was driving, and I looked up and said, "Boy, look at that strange balloon. It looks like Mickey Mouse ears floating way over there." He says, "Oh, yeah, that is interesting." So we're driving along, and it gets closer and closer and closer. I said, "Pull the car over." So we get off the side. Now, this is like the Patuxent Parkway busy. Not a gazillion people. This was 7, 8 o'clock at night, but it was still light, and there were some cars going. So we pull over and get out, and above us, about a telephone pole's length and a half, was this flat platform, about maybe 4 or 5 feet wide, square, floating over us and over the highway. And on the top of this flat platform were these bumpy, roundish, kind of looked like neoprene stacks of something all connected there. I couldn't figure it out. We looked and looked and looked and could not figure it out. What caught our attention the most was how this thing moved. It didn't float like a balloon, absolutely stock steady as if it were on some type of invisible rail. Did not deviate at all. And as it was moving, absolutely undeviating, the top kind of circled around every once in a while like that. And I got this feeling like it's like sniffing around for something. And it just moved along, and we were dumbfounded, and it moved off, and I thought, oh, I should get a picture of it. Duh. But by then it was too far away, and I had a old funky flip phone. It got nothing. There was nothing there. But the only thing that, when I recounted that to Antonio and he did the investigation on it, there in that part of the Northeast Corridor, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody who's got a government contract to figure out some spy apparatus or whatever. It's just endemic in that area. So it could be somebody who had a thing that let's, for a hoot, fly this thing over and see if we get any reports on it, because we need to take it out and check its stabilization. I don't know. But it could have been something like that. But if we have this, what I was thinking, like electrogravitic, it just absolutely, or magnetic, or what, just like on an invisible rail. That was interesting.
I have heard speculation of people saying the very same thing, that that's the reason they take these black projects, these secret projects out to see what type of reports they get. I don't know how true that can be or not, but someone asked in the message board, do you consider any of the UFO videos to be of any scientific interest?
Personally, me, I would have to go with no. Not unequivocal, no. I would say that most I would not feel comfortable with, because there are so many excellent hoaxes out there. What is most important about any video, audio, or picture evidence is provenance. You must know where it came from. Yeah. You must speak with who got it. You must figure out who that person is, and if they're credible, and if others saw that. Without provenance, forget about it.
Yeah. I remember asking Bruce Maccabee about that, and he said the witness is the most important thing when it comes to that. And like you said, with your phone, you had a flip phone at the time, but you didn't, think to take the picture.
I got something, but it was a little.
You did get something, yeah. A lot of times people can't even react fast enough, and I totally understand that, because you're so baffled.
And then here's the thing. Here's the other double edge of the sword, just like what we're talking about. So here I get a perfectly framed, excellent picture. Well, nobody can get a perfectly framed, excellent picture of an actual UFO, ergo, it's hoax. You can't win either way.
I know, I've heard that.
How come you never get really good photos of?
Yeah.
Because when you do, it's probable they're hoax, and if they weren't, you wouldn't believe them anyway. That's why I'm not working at proving anything. API is not out to prove anything. We're just an investigative body.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the cases. We have just a few minutes left here. You mentioned the cases that you've personally investigated. Have either Paul or,
Antonio
investigated some real baffling anything come to mind real quickly that you all kind of went over and reviewed and couldn't get anywhere?
I can't recall right off, because usually when somebody has a case and you discuss it, you aren't as drilled into the minutia as the actual lead investigator. And so for the most part, since there's only 3 of us investigators, there's just a lead investigator because the others are busy. You can't be typically, now we'll get together and we'll discuss information and facts, and other aspects of a case, but no, you get drilled down in your own case typically. And I'm sure they have had, I know Paul has, I'm sure Antonio has real head scratchers, but I couldn't tell you what they are, no.
Okay, if someone right now contacted your website and did a report on something they saw 10 years ago, do you actually look into that, or is it just recent cases?
It really depends on the case. If this was a case where there are, a half a dozen corroborating witnesses that we could speak with,
Yeah.
that's real big. 10 years old, light in the night sky, no. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't take a look at it and maybe send you some information about, we've heard of something similar in that same area. Here's a link to it. But again, if there is something to hang an investigation on it, yes, we would.
Yeah.
But if there isn't, required data and corroboration and really knowing and nailing down dates lots of times, one doesn't know until one looks at the evidence, whatever that evidence may be.
Right. And when you are communicating with a new witness, do you just take certain steps, and then if it gets to this certain step, then you actually speak to them on the phone or Skype or something like that?
Yeah. The first thing you do is, as Chief of Investigations, I acknowledge that we received their report and that, based upon whether or not they want to investigate, I say, since you didn't want it investigated, thank you for reporting. We'll just put this information in our files. If they do want to investigate it, I inform them that an investigation with us means we'll be needing to contact them several times during the investigative process, and they need to be a willing participant, a team member in this investigation. And some will say at that point, well, I don't really want to do all that. I just want to let you know. I just want to tell somebody, okay, so we'll get it out of there. That's triaging it. And then if you write and somebody says, yeah, I really want to talk to somebody, I have other people. Okay, good. So then you write and ask for a few little bits of information so you can begin a preliminary investigation, like exactly which direction they were looking, exactly where they were. I mean, you can go to Google Maps and you can look at the exact part of the sky they were looking at. So then you get a little bit of background info so that you have enough to ask questions that will make sense in the investigation. And then you make arrangements to make a telephonic interview. And at that point, then you're off and running with a pretty good case at that point.
Yeah, great. So can you give the listening audience basically how they'd find your website and all the information? And then let's talk about how they'd find your podcast.
Well, I had sent that information to you, so yes. I don't know if you show now.
It is in the show notes, but someone may be driving their car down the road and listening on their iPod.
All right. If you are driving down the road, remember that our organization is Aerial, AERIAL phenomenon.org. And if you hit that, it will take you to our website. And if you're then at our website, you will see, would you like to make a report? And then you would click on that, follow that, and hit send, and that generates an email to Antonio, who forwards it to me. So that's how you'd make a report. Now, if you're interested in listening to some of our past podcasts that we do too, API case files, which typically talks about some of our more interesting cases and goes in depth on them. And so it's API case files, just hit that on Google. And at API case files, you'll go to Libsyn, and there you will see, in addition to our case files podcast, the things we call API conversations, which is more this type of a podcast where we have a guest and we talk about all manner of things regarding a focused subject. Like we had David Marler, and we had you. You were the first one, Martin. You
were that's Paul's right. I forgot API all about that. Yeah.
Conversation, yeah.
Yeah.
And we had Joshua Cutchin, with his book, I just had Norio Hayakawa. So go there and you'll peruse, and then you can just hit that and download or stream out a past podcast. We put those out intermittently because nobody's married to doing anything monthly.
Sure.
And so
But
that's
if
how
someone
they would
picks
find
up
it.
the RSS feed or Stitcher or something like that, pops
Exactly.
right in.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
thanks
And-
so much. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's it. Yes. Uh-huh.
All right. Thanks so much. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
All
It
right.
was nice talking to you, Martin. I
Great.
hope to see you again.
Yes. You take care.
Bye-bye.
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 All right, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And if you were watching on YouTube, thanks so much. If you are listening as a podcast, I want to thank you so much for your support. And our show next week has John Burroughs. He had laryngitis this week. So John Burroughs will be joining us next week. Hopefully, hope he's not going to remain with laryngitis. Monday, we have an Everything Else show, and that's going to be about the grandfather paradox, someone who claims he has solved it. We're going to be talking to him in Tel Aviv. That's Monday during the day. It's not a nighttime show, but you can always catch that as a video. And if you support the show, you can catch that as a podcast. So thanks so much, and we'll be back here next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.